There's a certain hush that falls across the land just as dusk gives up and night takes over. Out here, you notice it. No neighbor's lantern, no dog bark echoing down the gully. Just the creak of wind through split-rail fence and the whistle of your own breath if you're foolish enough to listen. I'd gotten used to silence. That's the kind of man I'd become. A man who didn't much need the company of others, who found comfort in old regrets, like bones rattling in a sack. Sheriff badge gone, rifle gathering dust, grief-riding shotgun with every memory that dared poke its head out. It was shaping up to be another night like the last 100. Fire in the grate, stew simmering thin as ditch water. I was rubbing out. A knot in my thigh, cursing the bullet that took my left leg down to a limp and left me with the shame of outliving my family. The world outside was a black smear, punctuated only by the soft snow drifting past my lone window. I was halfway through reaching for the bottle when I heard it. 3 knocks. Soft, like a rabbit's foot, but urgent. Nobody knocked out here, not this far from town. Not unless it was trouble. I pulled myself up, every joint in my body complaining. The door creaked on its hinges as I peered into the twilight. Standing there was a child, barefoot, hair tangled in knots, little dress, dirty and torn. She looked up at me with eyes that had seen too much. "Please, mister. My mommy can't walk anymore. Please help, Daddy." For a second, the world cracked sideways. That word, that plea, it cut through me like a jagged rock. She looked nothing. Like my Ruthie, not really, but in that flickering porch light, all I saw was loss wearing a new face. I managed a grunt, half-hearted and gruff, but she didn't flinch. Just wrapped her arms around her thin chest and shivered, waiting. Behind her, the prairie stretched out, all dark and broken. I couldn't leave a child out there, not if I wanted to live with myself come morning. Still, it took me too long to answer. "Where's your mother?" I asked, my voice scraping the bottom of my boots. "Back that way," she said, pointing toward the tree line. "She fell and can't get up. She said you'd help." Said I'd help? I hadn't helped anyone in years, not even myself, but I couldn't turn away. Not from her, not from the tremble in her lip, or the hope she'd somehow found in this godforsaken stretch of nowhere. I grabbed my coat, gun belt, and a lantern. "Stay close," I told her, and she did. Her bare feet crunching in the old snow as I hobbled after her into the trees. The dark pressed in, but her tiny hand found mine, and I tried not to think about how long it had been since anyone had needed me for anything. She led me down a game trail, barely wide enough for my bad leg. "What's your name?" I asked, just to keep her talking. "June," she whispered. "Mama said don't talk to strangers, but she's real sick. She said you'd remember us." That twisted something in my chest. I tried to push down the old ache, focus on the present, but it was like hauling a mule through quicksand. "How old are you, June?" "7, she said, her voice soft as moth wings. "Mama said you're kind even if you look mean." I snorted despite myself, but there was no humor in it. I could see a shape ahead, someone slumped by the roots of an old cottonwood wrapped in a shawl. June let go of my hand and ran ahead, kneeling beside the woman. "Mama, I found him." I knelt down, careful with my leg, lantern light falling, over a woman's face. Pale, feverish, and familiar in a way that made my stomach knot. Not my wife, not my daughter. But she looked up at me, and in that glance, I saw all the roads I'd refused to walk, all the doors I'd slammed shut to keep the world out. I didn't ask questions. I just reached down, hoisted her into my arms, and started the slow trek back to my cabin. June followed, silent and wide-eyed, clutching the hem of my coat. My heart thudded with every step, the old pain mixing with something sharper, something dangerous. Hope. It's a strange thing, having strangers fill up your empty space. The minute I carried that fever-stricken woman through my door, my cabin shrank by half, every corner suddenly crowded with need. I set her down on my cot, bones lighter than a scarecrow's, breath whistling through cracked lips. The little girl, June, hovered beside her like a shadow, afraid of the light. My hands shook as I stoked the fire higher, fetched water from the barrel, tore strips off my only clean shirt to use as rags. The woman's cheeks were flushed, her skin hot as a stovepipe. I recognized that fever, had seen it steal whole families back when I wore a star. I did what I could, cooled her head, coaxed sips of water between cracked lips, tried not to look too closely at the angry bruise along her jaw. June wouldn't leave her mother's side, but every so often she'd glance at me, half trust, half terror, all hope. I moved quiet, gave her a blanket, set a tin cup of broth by her elbow. For a long while, the only sound was the wind rattling the windows, and Evelyn, she'd murmured her name once in her fever, whispering nonsense about rivers and horses. When night pressed hard against the cabin walls, Evelyn woke for real. Her eyes fluttered, focused on me, then darted to June. "Did he find us?" she rasped, and the fear in her voice set every hair on my neck prickling. "Only person here is me," I said. "You're safe for now." She squinted, searching my face, for the measure of a man she didn't know. Then she whispered, "McCrae?" Like she was dredging up a half-remembered ghost. "Yeah," I answered. "That's me." She flinched, turned her head away. June's hand slid into hers. There was something in that moment, an old recognition, a history I didn't want dragged into the light. "Evelyn Cartwright," she finally said, her voice barely above a breath. "Cartwright." The name dropped like a stone in my gut. Out here, every man knows the names that mean trouble. Cartwrights were notorious. Land squabbles, barn fires, violence trailing them like dust. The preacher brother Jedediah was the worst of them, a man who twisted scripture till it screamed. Felt my jaw clench. I didn't want this kind of trouble. But looking at Evelyn, bruised and broken, and at June, eyes wide with the kind of fear no child ought to know, I couldn't bring myself to send them back out. Instead, I set about tending them both. I boiled more water, dug out the last of the willow bark for her fever, and rolled a pallet for June by the hearth. It felt strange, fussing over them, my old habits scraping the rust off muscles I hadn't used in years. That night, as I watched the two of them sleep, Evelyn's face twisted in pain, June curled against her like a stray pup, I thought of all the things I'd lost, my Ruthie, my pride, the life I'd tried so hard to bury. Something in me softened, but only just. The Cartwright name was a curse and a warning. I'd have to watch my back now, maybe even my heart. Morning crept in cold and gray. I woke to June's hand tugging at my sleeve. "Mama says thank you," she whispered. "She says you're a good man," I grunted, not trusting myself to speak. The truth was, I didn't know what kind of man I was anymore. But for the first time in years, the cabin felt less like a tomb and more like a place where living things might belong. The days that followed blurred into a kind of uneasy truce. My cabin, always too quiet, too big for just one broken man, felt full now, sometimes stifling. I found myself listening for the shuffling of June's feet, Evelyn's low moans, the small sounds of living I hadn't heard in years. Every new sunrise brought fresh worry, that fever wouldn't break, that the past would come pounding at my door. But we settled into a rhythm. I made stew, split wood, boiled water. June fetched snow to melt, her tiny hands red with cold, stubborn as a mule. Sometimes she'd ask about my limp, or the badge I kept tucked in a drawer. I always dodged her questions, but she asked anyway. On the third evening, as the fire snapped and spat, Evelyn sat up, propped against my only pillow. She looked gaunt, skin sallow and stretched tight, but her eyes were sharp again. I poured her a cup of weak tea and tried not to stare. "You ever hear of a man named Jedediah Cartwright?" she asked, voice raw as a scraped knee. "I nearly dropped the tin." "Heard plenty," I said. Heard too much, some'd say. She nodded, lips pressed thin. He's my brother-in-law. Preacher with a mean streak, calls himself a shepherd, but all he tends is misery. My husband died by his hand, though. He'll never confess it to no one but the Lord. When I tried to run, Jedediah said June and I belonged to his fold, said he'd hunt us down, and the men in town— Her words caught. They looked the other way. Cartwrights scare good people into silence. I didn't answer right off. The Cartwright fold, Jedediah and his men, had terrorized the valley for years, always quoting scripture, always carrying guns. I remembered barn doors burned in the night, cattle driven off, a boy hanged from a cottonwood for stealing. The law never stuck to men like Jedediah, it just slid right off. I buried my husband myself, Evelyn said, voice breaking. Next morning, Jedediah came with 3 men and a rope. We ran. She looked at me, eyes pleading. I can't keep running. June deserves better. I felt something old and ugly flare inside me. Anger, maybe, or shame. I knew about running, had done enough of it myself. You're safe here. I don't aim to send a child out to fend for herself. Or her mother. She looked at me hard. Why help us, Silas? You don't owe us nothing. I stirred the fire, words tasting bitter in my mouth. Maybe I just know what it's like to need someone and have nobody answer. June curled up by the hearth, already drifting toward sleep, but her hand found mine and held tight. The cabin was still except for the crackle of flame and the storm picking up outside. I told Evelyn, quiet, as confession, about my own daughter, how I lost her to sickness, how I lost myself to the bottle after. She listened, not judging, just nodding as if she'd known it all along. That night, Evelyn and I forged a brittle sort of alliance. We were both running from ghosts, both tired of being afraid. As the wind howled and snow began to fall, I made a promise to myself. Whatever hell the Cartwright fold brought, they'd have to come through me first. Winter came in earnest, draping the prairie with a shroud of white so thick the world seemed muffled and far away. Inside my cabin, life grew close and tense, each of us learning how to make room for the others. Evelyn's fever broke, but the bruises lingered on her skin, a map of old battles. She moved carefully, never turning her back to a window. I caught her staring into the trees, always listening, waiting for the sound of hooves or worse. June, though, found small bits of happiness. I caught her laughing once, chasing dust motes across the floor, her bare feet pattering like rain. She was still, all bone and hunger, but there was light in her eyes now, and when she smiled, it almost hurt to see. I tried teaching her how to whittle, and she nearly sliced her thumb clean open, but she held the knife steady, jaw set with stubborn pride. She asked 100 questions a day, most of them about things I'd rather forget. Evelyn and I spoke, in low voices at night. She told me about her life before, back when she believed in good luck and happy endings. She'd been a Cartwright by marriage but never belonged. Her husband was the softest of the bunch, gone too soon under suspicious eyes. Jedediah's grip tightened after the funeral, his sermons growing darker, his fold swelling with men eager to do his bidding. When Evelyn tried to leave, she paid for it in bruises and broken promises. I confessed my own failures, the badge I lost, the daughter I buried, the ways I'd shut myself off from the world. There was something freeing in saying it aloud, even if it made me feel old and raw inside, but the world outside didn't forget. News carried on the wind, and one gray afternoon, as I made a rare trip to the general store for salt and flour, I caught whispers in the air. Folks in town eyed me with a mix of pity and fear. Someone muttered that Jedediah Cartwright was riding through the valley, hunting for a woman and child who'd gone missing. He wasn't alone. He had men with him, men who believed his brand. of justice was God's own. I left town fast, a cold pit in my stomach. The ride home was a blur, my heart pounding so hard I nearly dropped the reins. At the cabin, I told Evelyn what I'd heard. Her face went white, but she didn't cry. She just took June in her arms and squeezed her tight. "We can't run anymore," she said, her voice flat and certain. "He'll find us wherever we go." "No more running," I agreed. "If he wants a fight, he'll get one." We spent that night barricading windows, moving what supplies we had to the cellar. I showed June how to squeeze into the crawl space and hush her breath, taught her the tricks I'd learned hunting outlaws and evading death. Evelyn cleaned my old rifle, her hands steady despite the tremor in her lip. That night, for the first time in a long while, I felt the cold edge of fear, but beneath it, there was something else. Resolve. Maybe I'd failed before, but I wasn't about to let the Cartwrights take anything else from me. Not June, not Evelyn, not this fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, we could be something like a family again. We spent the next 2 days turning my battered old cabin into a fortress, or as close to one as 3 souls with nothing but borrowed courage and a handful of shells could manage. I hammered shut every loose board, stacked firewood up under the windows, laid traps in the brush out back. Evelyn patched up my coat, packed bandages and boiled rags, and kept June close. I'd never seen her eyes so clear. None of that feverish confusion from the first days. Just a tight jaw and a woman's quiet fury. June stayed near me as I checked the rifle, her small hands busy with scraps of whittled wood. She didn't complain, not once. She asked how many men were coming. I lied, said probably only a couple. I wanted to believe that lie myself, but deep down, I knew Jedediah would bring a pack. On the second afternoon, the world outside grew too quiet. Even the crows seemed to hold their breath. I stood on the porch, shotgun across my knees, every muscle tense. Then, hoofbeats, slow, deliberate, heavy as doom. A single rider first, then more behind, their shapes emerging through the powdery dusk. Jedediah Cartwright rode at the front, all righteous fire and black hat, Bible in one hand, rifle in the other. Behind him, 5 men, rough and cold-eyed, spread out in a crescent at the tree line. Jedediah's voice rolled over the yard, thick, with honey and venom. "Silas McCrae, I come in the name of the Lord seeking what's owed. You're harboring my kin and I'll have them back one way or another." I stood, legs aching, heart thudding like it might leap out my chest. "This is my place," I called. "You got no claim here, Cartwright. Evelyn and June stay with me." He laughed, a sound sharp enough to peel paint. "A fallen lawman and a pair of thieves. I offer you grace, Silas. Surrender them, and you might yet keep your soul." Grace. From a man who'd never shown any in his life. I felt the old anger rise, hotter than the fear. "You want them, you'll have to come take them." Jedediah's face twisted. "So be it. You've chosen darkness." His men spread out, rifles glinting in the last of the daylight. I could feel Evelyn behind the door, June tucked in the crawl space like I'd shown her, both holding their breath. Every second stretched, every heartbeat echoing years of failure and regret. But I wasn't the same man I'd been. Not anymore. Last. "Chance, McCrae!" Jedediah snarled. "Open the door or we burn you out!" I squared my shoulders and chambered around. "You want fire, preacher? I hope you're ready to meet your maker." It all hung in the balance then. Redemption, ruin, everything I'd tried to bury. My hand was steady, my voice strong, but inside I felt something old and tender, fierce as a promise. I would not fail these women, not this time. Night dropped like a hammer, swift and final. The last pink light slipped behind the trees, leaving the world washed in blue and black. Inside, the cabin was a tomb. Every board creaked, every draft set nerves jangling. I crouched by the window, eyes on the line of shapes outside, my shotgun, loaded, my breath shallow and slow. Jedediah called out again, his voice rolling through the dark. "You're a stubborn man, McCrae. You're alone out there. No one's coming for you." He was wrong about that last part. I wasn't alone. Not anymore. I looked at Evelyn, her jaw set, hands clenched around my revolver, ready to fight. June's small eyes, wide but determined, peeked out from her hiding place beneath the floorboards. A single gunshot split the night, a warning, a signal. Jedediah's men fanned out, moving through the brush, boots crunching snow. My heart kicked hard. I pressed my cheek to the cold wall, aimed for the shapes in the dark, and squeezed the trigger. The crack of the rifle shattered the silence. One shape stumbled and went down, cursing. Return fire splintered the porch post, sent a shower of wood into my lap. I gritted my teeth, feeling the old injury howl as I shifted for another shot. Evelyn fired from the kitchen, her bullet snapping past a shadow at the back door. For a moment, the world shrank to flashes. Muzzle fire, the tang of cordite, my own pulse roaring in my ears. Jedediah's voice came again, shrill, desperate now. "God's wrath is coming for you, McCrae. Hand them over, or you'll die with them." "Already died once," I muttered, firing again. A bullet ripped through my left shoulder, hot and blinding. I went down hard, vision spinning, but forced. Myself back up. Couldn't let the pain win. Couldn't let them win. The shooting lasted forever and no time at all. Two of Jedediah's men lay sprawled in the yard, another crawling away into the brush. The last burst of gunfire left the world ringing, still as death. Jedediah, wounded, staggered onto the porch, his preacher's coat flapping behind him. He pointed his gun at me, voice cracked and wild. "This is your judgment day, lawman." I tried to raise my shotgun, but my arm was numb, slick with blood. Evelyn appeared at the doorway, her hands steady as she leveled my old Colt at Jedediah. "Leave, Usby," she said. Her voice was quiet, but in it was all the pain and steel she'd gathered in her life. Jedediah sneered, tried to lift his rifle, but Evelyn fired first. He fell backward, a surprised prayer on his lips, landing face first in the snow. Then it was over. Silence fell, sharp and final. I slumped to the floor, dizzy with pain. Evelyn knelt beside me, hands gentle and sure, June scrambling up from the hiding place to press her small hand to my cheek. "Don't go," June whispered. "Please, Daddy." I closed my eyes, breathing in their nearness, the warmth, the hope. I'd protected them, bled for them, and in the end, I hadn't failed. For the first time in years, I wanted to live. Dawn crept in slow. The world outside glazed with frost and ash. I woke to the sound of voices, distant but growing, hoofbeats and the grind of wagon wheels. The gunfight's aftermath was smeared. Across my yard, spent shells, blood staining the snow, bodies lying where they fell. I tried to rise, pain lancing through my shoulder, but Evelyn pressed me back. "Don't be a fool," she said, with the faintest trace of a smile. "You've done enough." A short while later, the sheriff from town rode in, flanked by a few grim-faced men. They dismounted, boots crunching ice, eyes flicking between me, the bodies, and the battered old cabin. One of them spat, shook his head. The sheriff took it. All in, lips tight. "Cartwright's reign is over, looks like," he said. "Never thought I'd see the day." He nodded toward Evelyn and June. "You're safe now. Town'll take care of you both." But Evelyn straightened, pulling June close. "We're staying," she said, her voice soft but fierce. "This is our home now." She looked at me, splayed in blood-stained sheets, barely able to sit up, and something gentle flickered between us. "We owe Silas our lives. We belong here." There was a moment's silence, the sheriff weighing her words, maybe thinking of the times he'd looked away from trouble himself. He just tipped his hat and walked out, leaving us to our own mess and beginnings. The days blurred, pain, healing, repairs. Evelyn nursed my wounds with a tenderness that surprised us both. She tended the garden patch, patched the roof, scolded me when I tried to do too much too soon. June shadowed me everywhere, stubborn as ever. She brought me little treasures, a bluebird's feather, a smooth stone, a dried prairie rose. One evening, as the sun slipped low and the world glowed gold through the warped window glass, June placed a wooden star in my palm, rough, uneven, carved with more love than skill. Across its crooked arms, she'd scratched the word Dad, my voice caught in my throat. For a long time, I just stared at the star, thumb tracing the letters. June. Beamed, missing front tooth and all, Evelyn looked on, her eyes shining with the kind of hope I thought I'd lost for good. We didn't say much that night, but everything was different. The cabin was patched and battered, but it was alive, with laughter, the smell of stew, the quiet music of a family learning how to begin again. For the first time in years, the shadows felt further away, and the light, though pale, was enough to see by. The prairie knows how to keep a secret. Winter faded to mud and the fields blushed green, slow and cautious. Our wounds, some deep, some shallow, healed in ways we could measure only by quiet moments and the laughter of a child. Evelyn planted herbs out by the shed, her hands strong and sure, coaxing life from stubborn earth. June, wild with spring, roamed the yard like she'd always belonged there, hair tangled, cheeks smudged, pockets stuffed with the treasures of small hands and big dreams. I spent my days repairing fence lines, mending what was left of the barn, and carving, mostly for the pleasure of it and for June, who always demanded something new. There were still hard nights. I woke sometimes sweating, dreams filled with gunfire and loss, but now I had someone to ground me. June curled on my chest, Evelyn's hand at my shoulder, the smell of bread baking slow in the oven. One quiet evening, after supper, June clambered onto my lap, clutching something behind her back. "Close your eyes, Daddy," she ordered, and I did, feeling the old ache in my chest give way to something soft and almost unfamiliar. Okay. Open. She pressed a hand-carved star into my palm, this one finer than before, smoothed and painted with berry juice, the word Dad, etched bold and careful. I felt the weight of it. Light as hope, heavy as forgiveness. Evelyn watched from across the room, face aglow in the lamplight, a faint smile playing on her lips. I met her gaze, and something passed between us. Gratitude, humility, a recognition of all that had been lost and what might yet be found. I pulled June close, let her laughter fill the room. Out on the prairie, the world was still. I stood in the doorway as dusk fell, Evelyn's arms circling my waist, June's hand tight in mine. We looked out at the land, scarred but beautiful, fierce but forgiving. I realized then that I was no longer just a shadow haunting the edge of things. I'd been called back to life piece by piece by the courage of a little girl and the strength of a woman who refused to give up. Some knocks at your door, you answer without thinking. Others, you never forget, because they save you as much as you save them. The prairie, for all its loneliness, had given me a second chance, and this time, I was wise enough to open the door and let it in.